Welcome to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast Live Vibe. Per usual, I am the host and creator of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. It's your girl, Stephanie Hardy. And I am here with a special guest. I am so happy to be here with one of the people that I have been admiring from afar for so very long in my podcasting journey, and even a little bit before then as well. And someone who's just really glamorous in everything that she does with her show and even outside of her show, within wrestling and all of the above. Please welcome to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, Lo from Wrestling Winedown. How you doing,
Hi,
Lo?
I'm good. How are you? I'm so happy to be here.
I'm doing good and I'm so happy to have you because it's been my mission to sort of talk to more hosts and stuff. And I just feel like, you know what? I want to talk to Lo.
There we
So,
go. I'm here.
yes,
I'm ready for you.
yes. So we're in here and I'm so glad. So, of course, if you're watching live, please know that you can share, you can like, share, and subscribe, and also get it cracking in the comments if you want to talk about certain things within the comments or whatever, or if you hear something that resonates with you, pop in on the comments. Feel free to do that as well, and just like, share, and subscribe because we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, we are on Twitter, we are everywhere.
We're
So
worldwide.
yes, Hardy Wrestling Podcast worldwide. All right. So, Lo, I'm going to start by asking you the question I ask all of my guests, and that's when did you fall in love with wrestling?
I would say that I fell in love with wrestling around the age of 9 or 10. I definitely, the first time I saw it, I feel like it was love at first sight. Obviously, had to get used to everything and seeing the different superstars. And I always tell this story. The first time I came across WWE was on Telemundo on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and I saw John Cena. And I was like, who is this? And I started watching it. I don't speak Spanish. I always say that because everyone's kind of like, well, maybe she understood it. I did not. I was going off what was on the screen. And I just start watching it every week on the Spanish channel. 9 or 10, I didn't know if this was just on that channel, but then, I ventured out and I realized it came on the USA Network and I was in there like swimwear. I was watching it every week. I was watching SmackDown, and then ECW kind of started again and I started watching ECW, and I just fell in love with the different characters that WWE had to offer, whether it was a woman or a man, whatever they brought to the table, I was interested in. Obviously, John Cena was one of my first favorites. I still remember one of the wrestling shirts I got of him at Walmart. I wish I still had it because I would be rocking it today. But John Cena was one of my favorites. Um, Victoria, Melina, were two of my favorites on the women's side. And oh my God, I absolutely loved the characters that they had, even though they were supposed to be, the bad guys. Something about them just interested me. And it might have been, the gear that they had on or the characters that they were portraying. I'm not really sure, but I gravitated towards them heavily. And obviously, all of Eminem, Melina, Nitro, and Mercury. So good.
That's going back there. Like
Definitely. I
that was
remember I liked Deuce and Domino as well with Cherry because I used to dance when I was still, a little kid, and Cherry reminded me of like a dancer. Like her outfits reminded me of costumes that I wore for recitals, and I just always liked her. I just felt like she was a really good manager. She played her role, and then when she started wrestling, I was like, "Okay, girl, let's see what you got."
I kind of forgot that there was a period where she was wrestling. Like that wasn't around the time I started watching wrestling. But at the same time, it's like around the 2000s, it was always like kind of like these three groups of certain people, like these tag teams with a female at the center of it. And I used to think that was so cool. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you actually thought that was cool as well. And the fact that you started watching wrestling on Telemundo, like, I'll never forget the time I actually saw like a wrestling match on a Spanish channel that was on my TV, and I was
Hmm.
just like, "Oh, so that's how it sounds." Because they actually had the announcers and the commentators
Hmm.
commentating in Spanish and everything. And it was so interesting because
Yeah.
it's it was just really different because it's just like, of course, when you watch something in English, for so long in your whole life, and then all of a sudden you hear it in another language, it's like, wow.
Right. Yeah.
It's really interesting. So that's so cool that you watched it, in a different place. And, John Cena, that's the guy, That was the
Yes,
guy of the
indeed.
2000s. I loved him very much. And like I remember I even got to fighting with my dad one time over his chain gang t-shirts,
Oh
but
my goodness.
but I can buy it now though cuz I'm grown.
Right. Period.
Yes. So when did you realize that you loved using your voice in terms of your media career?
So I had a radio show when I was in college. It was called The Lowdown, and I was on every Fridays from 6 to 8. And I would play hip hop music, and I would play R&B music, and I would do like celebrity news as well. And during this time in college, like I wasn't really watching wrestling like that. I kind of fell off, and I was just doing, the radio show, and I really enjoyed that. But as I was progressing through my academic career, I realized that at some point, I was gonna have to stop the radio show when I graduated, or close to when I graduated. And I always had the idea, well, maybe I could do it like as a podcast. So um, I wanted to do that, and then I kind of sat on it for a while. And my friend Haley was tweeting one night, and she was talking about wrestling. And I was like, "You like wrestling?" And she was like, "Yeah, do you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And we had known each other for years before that because we had the same major, we had some of the same classes, so we were familiar with each other. But we had no idea that we both shared that common interest of wrestling until she tweeted. So we didn't really say anything more about it. And then one day we were kind of like, well, she was like, what if we start a podcast? And I was like, oh, yeah. And, start doing my research. I saw there were not a lot of women out there. I saw a couple podcasts. Those wrestling girls were out there, but it was mostly white men. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a little bit interesting because, I can't really look at anyone and be like, okay, I want to mold myself like that. So I was like, we're really just going to have to do what we want to do with this show. We can kind of go off how the men have been doing it, but we need to have some type of spin, a niche almost. So Haley really liked beer. I don't drink beer. I might drink a cider every once in a while, like a pineapple cider or apple cider, but you won't catch me with a Miller Lite, Bud Light, none of them. I don't drink them. But I was like, what about wine? I start thinking, and I still have the text where I was like, Wrestling Winedown in all caps. And I was like, that's what the show needs to be called. You have SmackDown, take the smack out, put wine in. It's perfect. And we just went from there. We recorded in our universities. They have like a journalism department, so they have like a TV studio, they have podcast studios. So we recorded there every week. We did WWE recaps, we did a little bit of AEW, we would talk about news and stuff like that. And it was fun. It was something that it was like an outlet for us. We were able to enjoy professional wrestling together and talk about it, and have this platform where other women who might be in the same boat as we were, who are interested in starting a podcast, or want to hear about this news or the recaps from a woman's perspective, they don't have that, or they have very minimal. So I'm glad that we started that together.
Okay, so initially from what I'm hearing is you sort of started your media career in college.
Yeah.
And did you ever think about doing it like before college?
Uh I mean, I interned at a radio station when I was at the end of high school. So I had been around like different radio personalities and stuff like that, and that's when I kind of was like, I think I want to do radio. I always knew I wanted to do some type of broadcast. My first thing when I was in 8th grade was I want to be on TV. I want to be a news anchor, and I still kind of want to do that in the back of my head, but I did my internship, and I saw all these amazing professionals, on the radio, and I was like, oh, I really want to do that. And I was very fortunate to have voiced some commercials, and did PSAs and stuff like that were on the radio, but I never had my own show. And that was kind of like why I wanted to do it on the college station, was because I wasn't going to do it at a large conglomerate of radio stations where they can't have me test what I can do on their platform. So, a university will. And, I'm very fortunate that UNLV had that platform for students that were interested in radio or podcasting to be able to do that. So I would say it started, I was probably like 18 or 19 when I had interned there, so around there.
Okay, that's really cool that you saw that and sort of decided that maybe this is the direction you want to go in. I feel like that sort of inspires me a little bit in a sense because it's just like I never thought that I would do anything like this at all. And people's journeys are way different, to it and everything. But I
Right.
never thought I'd be in anything like this at all. So it's just like when I think about my career and where I want to go, that's kind of what I want to do, but I only want to do exclusively wrestling. So I
Right.
don't know exactly how that would work, education wise, or how that would work, professionally, of course, as I'm still finding my way because it's only been like 2 years. But,
Yeah.
just hearing your journey, and how you sort of utilized your educational journey to sort of, feed into your love of wrestling, that's really inspiring. And I really like that. That's
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to utilize that and, let that feed that into your life. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
So, you mentioned some of the factors that sort of got you into wrestling, but what exactly keeps you interested even as an adult?
I really like the storyline aspect of it. I've been a reality TV show fan for so long, and I almost feel like professional wrestling is kind of like a reality TV show. You have these different storylines, you have these characters, whether you like them or you hate them, you're probably going to tune in every week or you're probably going to keep up with it. And there's been a lot of characters, past, present, and in the future that have really kept me interested. One being, Bianca Belair. I'm a Bianca Belair stan. I can't say it enough. Like, she
Oh, me
has
too.
inspired me so much, and I wish she would have been in the WWE when I was like 9 or 10 and first started watching, because we really didn't have that much representation. We had Crystal, who kind of wrestled, but she was mainly a backstage interviewer. You had Queen Charmel, who was with Booker T as his manager, but she didn't wrestle either. So there was no black woman within, you know, Alicia Fox came around, I think, like a year or two later. But when I first started watching wrestling, there was no one, no black woman in ring who was like, having matches with Melina or Victoria or Candice Michelle, etc. So I wish I could have had that. So seeing that now and seeing the impact that Bianca Belair has had on, grown women like myself and, these young women, it really is inspiring and it keeps me interested. I've really loved following her journey and, seeing people like John Cena come back and, people being given their flowers, Queen Charmel at the Hall of Fame. I feel like that was such a great moment to be in person watching. And I cross my fingers, and every time they announce Hall of Fame people, I always want Jazz or Victoria to be in there because I just feel like they deserve it. And that's another reason that keeps me so interested, because I want to see them get their flowers eventually. I want them to get them while they're alive. They've done so much for this sport, whether in WWE or outside, and I
Right.
feel like they deserve it at this point. And on the men's side as well, there's been some incredible performers that have really kept me interested over the years. Randy Orton, I really like Carmelo Hayes right now, Braun Breaker. Um, there's just so many. I really liked Big E's rise to, winning Money in the Bank to eventually holding a title. But I enjoy watching these people that work hard and are given the opportunities that they so rightfully deserve.
Yes, that is one of the most amazing parts about watching wrestling. It's like when you're invested in a person and then you see more of their story. Of course, it was a lot less, back then because we didn't have as much access, to them as we do now with social media. But then
Right.
it's just like when you watch their stories and they sort of let you into their world and how they grew up, and you find that they're a lot more relatable than you initially thought. And then once you become invested in their story, you want to see them win. And it's just like you're so invested and you want so much more for them when you see that they're not getting as much. And it's
Right.
just like once they finally do get that opportunity to show what they're made of, and then they finally reach the top of the mountain, it's almost like you're up there with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I
because it's like
agree.
when you mentioned Bianca Belair, you mentioned Big E, and then I also think about Kofi Kingston and his Kofi Mania moment. Like when they won, I felt like I won.
Yeah. I
Even though it has
agree.
nothing to fully do with me, but at the same time, it still has to do with you because you watch them, grow up in a sense. And so once they reach that, goal that they've been reaching for so long and fighting for so long, you feel like you're watching these people win, and it makes you feel good inside. So that is definitely a reason to stay invested with it. And also, when it comes to reality TV, like that's valid as well. Because
Yeah.
it's like they branched off into reality television, but then, I could see how they could sort of, how they could be, how wrestling can be sort of an unsung hero into the existence of reality television, even though a lot of people
Mhm.
probably won't even give it that much credit.
Right.
That's very valid as well. So yeah, I get it. Definitely. So you did mention how you went to the Hall of Fame, and you experienced Queen Charmel going to the Hall of Fame, as well as the Undertaker, and as well as the Steiner brothers, and Vader as well posthumously. So what has been your favorite live wrestling experience since you've been going to them?
Oh, wow. Um, ooh, that's a good one. Um, the one that comes to my mind first is when I went to a wrestling show. I want to say I was probably like 10 or 11, and I went with my mom. And my mom does not watch wrestling. She was just going because I needed someone to go with, and she was just in it to be there. So she originally bought tickets. We get there, and they're like, these seats don't exist. And I had made these, these posters. I was in it, girl. And they were like, we're going to move you. We're going to move you right, that curve when they come by the entrance. We're going to seat you right there, but you need to throw your posters away. So I was hurt that I had to throw my posters away, but I threw them away. It was
Hmm.
such an incredible show. I will never forget that. Like seeing the superstars like right there. And I was at this time I was still very afraid of Undertaker. He was there. I was just like, "Oh my god." Like that was probably one of the best moments because I was young and I just remember it. Like I still get goosebumps thinking about it because it was just such a cool moment. I feel like every kid should have that moment that likes WWE. You have the kids that get Rey Mysterio's mask or Naomi's glasses and stuff like that. Like the things that they could take back with them, but you know, you also have the memories in your head. Even if you don't get items from superstars, you'll always remember, that first show that, you sat really close or you got to meet a WWE superstar, as they were leaving the ring or, they touched your hand. So, I feel like even if you don't have those memorabilia items from WWE superstars, the memories just last forever. And that's one that I'll never forget.
Okay, so was it a Raw, was it a SmackDown, or was it like a
It was a
house show?
SmackDown.
Oh, okay.
I think it was like my first no, it wasn't my first show. My first show was a Raw house show, and I remember King Booker was there. And I think that was either my second or my third.
Okay. That sounds like a really cool experience. Like, I hate it when they tell you to throw your signs away, though. That it's
They
like you
weren't
put in
bad.
that
It's not
much.
like yeah, it's not like I had anything bad on them, of course. I was like 10 or 11, but they didn't want the signs right there, like right at the front, which I don't really understand why now that I think back on it, but who knows?
It's like you work so hard, to make the sign, and then they tell you only for you to throw it away. Like that would have made me sad too as a little girl. But at least you still had a good experience with your
Yeah.
mom. Like,
She
but did
always
she?
she
Did she
always
have
brings
the?
up she's like, "You know what? My ears were ringing the whole time. You were screaming so loud." Like, 'cause that very high pitched scream, I forgot who else was there that I was, like, a fan of where I was screaming that loud. Cause I don't think John Cena was there, so I'm trying to figure out who else would have been there for me to be yelling like that, but I don't know. I was screaming. I was in there.
Wow, that's pretty funny because that actually sounds like me too. Like I'd be screaming and into it. Except now, like the last time I went to a live show was SmackDown in Birmingham in March.
Mhm.
This was the one where sadly Big E got injured at.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and it's just when I was there with my boyfriend, it's like I had to really like find a way to scream and yell without, overexerting my voice. Because the last time I went to a wrestling event like that, as an audience member for WWE, I didn't have a podcast and I didn't have, any sort of platform where I'm talking like this. See, at this
Right.
point, it's like I'm still trying to protect my voice while also at the same time still being loud.
Right.
But I just let it go, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna be loud, and then they'll just have to deal with it. And I still did it, and I still had fun, and still had at least 80% of my voice.
Oh, good.
Everything
You're good then.
everything was okay. So, but yeah, live events are amazing, and I also love as I grow in my wrestling career, I love commentating for them too.
Yeah.
It's fun. I love it so much. So, who would you say are your top 5 wrestlers, male, female, or non-binary?
Of all time?
Yeah, of all time.
Okay. Bianca Belair, Victoria, Jazz, Jacqueline, and you know what? I really love Willow Nightingale.
Oh my god, I
Like,
love her.
I don't know what it is, but I really like watching her in the ring, and I just feel like she's so bubbly. I'm gonna put her as the fifth. Even though I'm a new fan, I feel like at this point I'm very comfortable putting her there. What about you?
Oh, it's so funny that you said her because it's like I fell in love with her on AEW, and that was the first time I ever saw her. Like I had heard people, say her name a lot, but I had just never seen her before. And the first time I saw her was on AEW, and she was fighting in the Owen Hart tournament, and I
Mhm.
wanted her to win so bad because I just fell in love with her athleticism, and I just loved her hair and just her beauty. Like it's just everything about
Yes.
her is just so gorgeous, and I was just like, why didn't she win? I mean, no shade to my baddie Red Velvet, but I wanted Willow to win so bad
Yeah.
because I just loved her and just everything she had, and I was just like, oh, I love her too, and hopefully I can get her on the podcast at some
Well,
point.
that would be
But
amazing.
oh my god, I would fangirl out for maybe 15 seconds, but then I'd get it together. And just be professional. But well, my top 5 is kind of different cuz it's like I have male and then I have female.
Yeah, I just
Um
realized that I listed all women.
but that's okay though.
I
That's
have a
okay.
men's one, but I can't even start. I mean, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart, um, John Cena, um, mm, hmm, I'm missing two. Um, Gosh, greatest of all time. I'm like, I have a great of this month. Um,
That's fine.
I'm gonna throw Wardlow in there. I feel like
Uh-huh.
Wardlow, prepare to be sick of me. Okay, I'm gonna keep on mentioning you on everything I do. Okay, Wardlow and I'm gonna throw Paul London in there, which I feel like is a spicy one. But
Yeah.
I watched Paul London, when I was watching like Eminem and Deuce and Domino, and I felt like he was always just so agile and he just does great things in the ring. So I'm gonna throw
Mhm.
Paul London in there.
Yeah, him and Brian Kendrick were a really great tag team.
They worked very
They
well
were
together.
amazing. I feel like the 2000s on SmackDown is like they don't get enough love for their tag teams. They don't. And I feel
They
like
don't.
that should be something that should be talked about a little bit more among wrestling circles is to talk about tag teams on SmackDown in the 2000s cuz that was a really rare time.
It
And
really
just
was.
yeah, and then to just look at, tag team wrestling, and it looks a little bit different now. But if you just look at it back then, like it was really good then too. But a lot of people really don't give it that much credit because there was so many other things going on. But
Right.
yeah, but Jesus, like they deserve credit for their tag team work back then. But to answer my question that you directed back at me, which doesn't happen often, um, my top 5 women is number one, Sasha Banks. She's the greatest to me. Number two, I would say is probably Trish Stratus. Number three, um, Lita. Number four, Jazz, and number five, I would say, is Naomi.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Very
I'm
good
gonna keep
list.
saying their names because this is my show. Um,
Period.
period. Exactly. And for the men is a little bit harder though. Like,
Yeah.
but I do know my number one is The Rock. Um,
Okay.
The Rock is my number one. Number two, I would say is probably Shawn Michaels. Number three, Eddie Guerrero. And number four, Rey Mysterio, and number five, Rob Van Dam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very good. I
So
still have
those
this
are,
memory of Rob Van Dam. I don't know how much I can say on here, but
you can say whatever you want.
Iridian and I went to Wale Mania, and the only thing that I really remember clearly, I didn't have any wine that night. I just, I'm just remembering right now. But Rob Van Dam and Katie Forbes, oh my goodness! Like if you see them in person, that's an experience. I was just
Oh,
like,
really?
yes, Rob Van Dam was smoking a blunt while Katie Forbes twerked next to him, and I was like, you know what? This is worth the $30 that I paid to get in here.
Wale Mania looks so fun.
It was. It was.
Like, it just looks like such a fun experience with all the wrestlers in there. You're in there watching people rap and just have fun and everything. Like, it just looks really fun. Like, it seems like a really great part of the WrestleMania experience.
Yeah, I agree.
And then I love Wale anyway as a rapper. So it's just like that and wrestling put together is like my head would probably explode with excitement. Like, seriously, it would just be too much for my soul to put together. But Rob Van Dam is definitely one of my favorites. I used to love him, young, and then I loved his theme song because I did share that with you on social media. That
Oh,
was one
yes,
of
you
my
did.
favorite theme songs ever. Like, to this day, if you play One of a Kind, I'm losing it. I am completely losing it. I just love him. I love him and just everything he was able to do and how he was the first wrestler I ever saw, jump up on like a cage and actually just stay there. I was like, "Oh my god, it's
Oh.
Spider-Man." Like, I just love that so much. I was, oh my god. I'm a sucker for a high flyer.
Yeah.
And I'm a sucker for a technical wrestler too. So, and a very showy person as well. So I just kind of run the gamut. So there we go. Those are some of my favorites. And of course, favorites are always being added. The more I learn and the more
Right.
I'm exposed to as well. I love everybody, but it'll go in and out sometimes.
I agree. Yeah.
So I love how you decided to make your podcast, and turn it into like a niche using wine, because that's something I've never really thought about before. And I think that was something that interested me about your platform. It's just the fact that you decided to combine wrestling and wine and just sort of chilling out and watching it while drinking your favorite drink.
Mhm.
Cause I remember I did that one time with some sangria, and I had the craziest experience because I think this was the night Sasha Banks won, her first Raw Women's title against Charlotte, and I just so happened to be, drinking, and then I was watching it, and I was just like, and when she won, I kid you not, I was sitting on the living room floor, and I was just crying. I was like, oh because I love Sasha so much. And it's just like when she won, I was like, it happened. Oh my God. And I just started crying. Um,
Yeah.
so is that something that you tend to do a lot of the time while you're watching wrestling? Is drink a favorite spirited drink?
You know what? It depends. Yeah, it definitely depends. Like when I go to live events, sometimes I'll have a drink, sometimes I won't. But usually when I'm watching a pay-per-view, it depends as well. Like I really do pay attention to Twitter when the pay-per-views are on because people they say their best things when the pay-per-views are on. So
Yeah.
I usually will keep an eye on there and see if I have anything to add with and I like to keep a clear mind when I'm doing that. So I usually won't be, consuming too much, but um it just depends. It depends on my mood for the day.
I completely understand that. So it's so funny because you talk about Twitter. Like, people be popping off on Twitter.
They sure do.
Like live tweeting is such a fun experience, if it's done right and if you're not, being mean or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, like live tweeting is one of the most funnest experience I've ever had in my life. Like especially when it comes to wrestling. And then you see the people who make all kinds of stuff where they make you laugh and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
Public Enemies, they are by hands down one of the
They are
funniest
so
live
good. I don't know
tweeters.
how they have videos just waiting to use for reactions, but they have the perfect video for everything. And Skinny
Yes.
Mysterio, Karen, same thing. She has a picture and a video for everything. I'm like, I have to search to find a picture to use if I want to be
Me too.
funny. Like, you guys just have them at your leisure. I wish I could be that.
Oh my god, me too. I have to look for them as well, especially if I think about something immediately. I'm gonna, oh my god, I gotta do this real quick, before someone else does it or before I forget or something like that. So I
Right.
understand that struggle. I understand it, but it's just so funny to see the type of stuff that people come up with and people make comparisons to or stuff like that. So it's
Yeah.
really funny, and I'm glad that you came up with that and had the courage to move forward with combining, your love of wine with wrestling. I think that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, as you evolved as a podcast host in the wrestling world, were there any obstacles that you faced and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I had mentioned earlier that, it used to be a two-person show. So it was my friend Haley and I, and we started in 2019, April of 2019. And a year later, or less than a year later, the pandemic started. And we were kind of like, okay, what are we going to do? So we had kind of taken a little break, and, we're trying to figure out if we were going to do virtual or what. And Haley actually ended up moving. So Haley lives in Seattle now. So, obviously we didn't have the leisure of being, in the same studio anymore and stuff like that. And I think we recorded one episode in May of 2020. And then um at that time, we had kind of Haley had kind of not, wasn't really interested in wrestling anymore. And she was kind of starting to fall out. And in October of 2020, that was when she stepped away from the show, which I'm not sure if people saw that, but people still think it's me and her. It's me. It's it's me over here. So um that was a little bit of a challenge because, you know, I still wanted it to be Wrestling Winedown, what we started with, but I knew that it was going to become, kind of like an extension of me at this point. I wasn't really looking to get another co host. I really like the idea of having different people on each week to tell their stories, maybe have sometimes a consistent co host, but nothing permanent. So I realized that Wrestling Wind Down was really just an extension of me. So since then, I've really started to integrate, more of myself into stuff and kind of make the brand of Wrestling Wind Down my voice. Not so much of here's our episode, here's this, here's that. Very like professional. I still am professional by nature, but I feel like I've added a little bit of my flair to it, and I'm really excited that soon we'll be rebranding. Still Wrestling Wind Down, but something logo wise and you know sound wise in terms of like intro outro music that is more me, that fits kind of what I like. So we'll see. I mean, I'm very excited for that. It's coming very soon, and that was definitely an obstacle of going from having a co-host, someone that would run the social media with you and stuff like that, to just by yourself. But I've really enjoyed it, and I've made a lot of connections with different individuals within the wrestling community who I've been able to have on my platform, or have given me advice. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I imagine that has to be, a little bit of like a major adjustment to go from you having, your own tag team partner in a sense to you having to go it alone.
Yeah.
Like, I imagine that had to be, a pretty tough adjustment. And then also navigating it in the midst of the pandemic and everything that it was in the beginning, because Jesus Christ. Um it was
Yeah.
a lot. Like it was a lot. And just the idea that you were able to have the courage, to go forward and still do it and still, push forward for it and find your voice and your passion within it and making it sort of fit you and not sort of make or and not like, you know, I'm trying to say you like basically just making it fit you. Like
Yeah, because
it's just a really
when
good
we
thing.
started, when we started, it was, the logo, the sound, like the intro and outro. Um, you know, my friend Joy, she creates our logos, and then my friend Fior created our intro and outro music, and it was something that we had both agreed on. And seeing as Haley has moved on to her, her other endeavors in her life, and I'm still here, I feel like it's really important for the brand to grow as well. I still love the logo. Don't get me wrong. I still love the intro and outro music, but I feel like we're coming up on 4 years next year, and you know, you have to grow. You can't just
Right.
stay stagnant. You have to do new stuff. You have to bring new stuff to the table. And, you know, at first I was a little bit nervous to put a little bit more of my flair into it because I'm like, okay, I really haven't so far. Like I wonder if people enjoy it. But, the little tidbits that I have given so far, people have really enjoyed. So I'm really much hoping that people will enjoy, once the new logo is up and once we have the new music in. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's great that you're thinking about that branding and stuff. Have you ever thought about maybe starting your own wine?
To start what?
Your own wine.
I have not, because it's a very intricate process. I think I listened to a Bella's podcast, and I've listened to a couple other videos of winemaking, and oh, I listened to Carmela as well. I,
Yeah.
it's definitely something that's kind of like a dream type of thing because it's very expensive to do and it's very time consuming. And I'm the type of person that if I do something, I'm very hands on with it. I don't want to give it to someone else to do. I want to do it myself. And I feel like that's kind of what winemaking is. Like you would definitely need to, be picking your own grapes and be hands on with the design. And maybe one day, maybe in a couple years or, 10 years from now, I'll decide that I want to make a wine. But right now, I definitely couldn't commit the time that I wanted to create my own wine.
Of course. It's just that in my imagination I can just see it like wrestling wine down wine or like I don't know what name it could go with, but just in my mind I can see it at the store. I can see it at Publix or something. Like my brain is just all the way there. And I just don't know why, but it's just like it just popped into my head like, oh, a wrestling wine down wine. That would be interesting.
It would be
But
interesting.
yeah, it would. So what are some of your hobbies outside of wrestling?
I enjoy traveling. I like trying new restaurants here in Las Vegas. I have to throw going to wrestling shows in there because I feel like I'm going to stuff almost every month now, which is crazy to think about. Um, And honestly, just relaxing and just, enjoying time with friends and family. I'm very low key when I'm not, recording or doing something with Wrestling Wind Down. I just like to keep to myself. And I do enjoy, an occasional binge watch on Netflix or Hulu. I obviously still really like reality TV. So, The Circle, Love is Blind, The Ultimatum was a shit show, but, I like the different the different stuff like that.
Okay, that's cool. I tried to watch The Ultimatum, but then I just decided to back away from it.
You know
Because
what? I
it just
probably should have did the same thing.
because to me, I guess because I've been in a long-term relationship for so long now, almost 10 years, and sometimes it's just when I see stuff like that, it sort of it sort of gives off the impression that it has to happen when you say it happens or else, everything that you've been through is null and void and it just bothers me.
Yeah,
Like it
I
just
get it.
really bothers me, like bothers parts of me that I just can't I just can't. And it's just like other reality shows like I was I used to watch reality shows like around the time there was Flavor of Love and
Yes, girl.
all like Flavor of Love and I Love New York and
Yes.
Flavor of Love Charm School and stuff like that.
Yes.
And America's Next Top Model, like that was really the
Yes.
kind of reality shows I would watch. And American Idol, of course.
Yeah.
Um, when it was on Fox and everything like that, those were really the reality shows that I was into back then. But then it's like I kind of and then I used to watch a little bit of Bad Girls Club too,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I kind of fell off, with reality shows after a certain point because they all sort of felt the same where everybody was fighting about something out in public. And I was just like, yeah, I'm tired of this. And I just went to something else. But I do acknowledge that, it is still a very much, lucrative,
Oh,
brand.
definitely. Yeah.
So I do still respect it in a sense because I mean, people start all kinds of careers out of that. So I mean, I get it. I totally get it. Love it. I'm just not sure if I could ever do it, but I just
Oh,
love
no,
it.
I wouldn't.
Oh my gosh, I'd be so scared. I mean, I love the camera, but I just don't think, I could do a reality show because I'd be the one that would just run away from conflict. I'm conflict avoidant, very much so. It's funny for you to love wrestling, but then be conflict avoidant. Um, but yeah. So who's been your favorite guest on your show? If you could narrow it down.
Mm. I really liked having Lisa Marie Varon, also known as Victoria. I felt like that was one of the most amazing things that has ever happened to me. And she was so kind, and she really gave, a lot of great information, and I really liked that interview, and I had the chance to meet her this year at WrestleCon in
Hmm.
Dallas, and she remembered me, and she was so nice, and that's something that I'll never forget. I always love having Iridian Fierro on. Iridian is a part of Rest Friends, which is a podcast based in Chicago. Her and her cousin Teddy, they do wrestling coverage and stuff like that. We host a monthly tidbit on my show, or a show itself, called Chardonnay and Cheesemay, where we just kind of go through the gossip in the wrestling community, and just kind of, it's like girl talk. I feel like we don't have a lot of girl talk within the wrestling community when it comes to
Right.
like news and gossip and stuff like that. It's just on the timeline. So it's been really refreshing to do that with her. And she recently joined our team as a social media assistant. I know when we were in Dallas, people were like, "We love Wrestling Winedown," and they were looking at me and her, and she's like, I, and I was like, "Just we'll address it later." like, but I mean, she's on so often that people are like, is she your co-host? She just pops on when she
Right.
wants to. I can't tell her no. That's my best friend. So her, Lisa Marie Varon, I really liked having Andrea from, she is an executive producer with MTV, Nickelodeon, VH1. She did the Met Gala. I really liked having her on because she had a lot of good insight into her career. And I told her off air, I was like, your career is what I wanted when I was little, like when I was like a teenager, because I still deep down inside really want an MTV show hosted by myself, but we'll see if that happens. But the fact that I asked her, I was like, "So, have you ever heard of It's On with Alexa Chung that used to be on MTV?" She's like, "Yeah, I produced that." I was like, "You did?" I was watching. I loved it all. And she just had her hand in so much stuff. So many amazing reality shows and different shows that these networks have done, and she was just so candid with her time, and I learned so much from her. So, I would say those 3. I really also liked having Victor Perry on. I felt like he had great insight into his wrestling club, and to see where he is now. And I interviewed him like 2 months ago, and then he had Sasha Banks in his classroom like a couple
Oh
weeks
my
later, and I
god.
was like, holy shit. Like, this is huge. Like, I already knew it was huge based on the reaction, and it's just something that's so different from what other people are doing. Like, I don't see any other wrestling clubs out there. And to have that recognized by Sasha Banks and her saying that she would go and then actually following through, those kids will never forget that. And that warms my heart so much. And he'll never forget that either. Like, I just love it. It was
Yeah,
so
I
adorable.
yes. I loved having him on my show too because I feel like it wasn't like it was we were like right there together. Like when
Yeah.
he was on your show and then he was on my show. And it's just like
Yeah.
he was one of my favorite guests as well cuz just look like hearing his story and everything that he loves about his music and then how much he pours into the kids and all of that other stuff and then he told me about the surprise but didn't tell me what was actually going to happen. He was just like, "Look, there's something on the horizon, but I can't tell you what it is, but it's going to be big." And I was like, "Okay." And then I just remember looking on my phone after work and seeing that Sasha Banks came to the class, and I was just like, "Oh my God, come on, children, yes!" And they were so
Yes.
excited. They were
Oh,
playing with her. She was playing with them. It was just the sweetest thing, and I was just
heart.
so happy for them, in that moment because how many kids, you know, like us who are like young and didn't have a place like that at
Yeah.
school. And just the fact that he was able to give that to them, even now, it's just the most amazing thing on the planet. And I just love it. And then he keeps talking to them, even as the show is going on with his live tweets and everything. And I'm just like, yes. It's one of the most wholesome things in wrestling,
It
period.
really is.
I love it. So I'm so happy that we were both able to have him on our
Yeah.
shows and we can share in that. And I love how you had Victoria too, because he said that was one of his favorites. And
He did.
she was one of my favorites too. Cause Victoria, man, her and Trish, they fought some wars, man.
They sure did.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that. I love that for you. I'm so glad you were able to have her on.
Thank you.
Fingers crossed, maybe she'll be on mine. We'll see.
Oh,
We just
manifestation.
gotta manifest it. Gotta
We
manifest
do.
it. So, where do you gain your inspiration for a lot of your wrestling subjects that you talk about on your show when you don't necessarily have a guest?
Well, I can kind of go off of the new series that we're doing, which is called "The Life of a Wrestling Fan." So what the series is it focuses on individuals that have amazing careers that are not within wrestling, or they might be, and they're also professional wrestling fans. So when I came across Andrea, I was like, I really enjoy what she's doing. She's a wrestling fan, but she also has this amazing career, and I just wanted to talk to her about her career. And I was like, but she's a wrestling fan. I was like, there's something I could do here. I was like, we can talk about how she likes wrestling, but we can also talk about how she, integrates that in her career, which she has. She's been able to have like Dolph Ziggler and HBK, in these studios with her as an executive producer. So the fit was seamless. I have some other ones coming up that I'm really excited about where, they have large platforms, or, they have worked with WWE, or they've done different stuff like that, but they're still wrestling fans. Um, so I guess you could say that I kind of came up with that, the life of a wrestling fan, because I wanted to showcase Andrea's career, but I also wanted to showcase that she's a wrestling fan too. And there are so many people that have these amazing careers. It could be in media, it could be in engineering, it could be in, all these different categories and sectors, but they still like wrestling. They go home and they sit down with their wife or their husband or their kids, and they still watch wrestling just like us. Um, so that was kind of my inspiration there. There's been other ones where I focused on, like gear makers or theme song creators, the people that are in wrestling, but they're not necessarily in the ring. So that was another series that I did late last year, that I really enjoyed. But I honestly just think about what my audience will enjoy. I know I'll enjoy it, but what they will enjoy. I have a lot of people that I'm grateful that follow me that are within media, and they might have not known about Andrea before I had her on the show. So that creates a networking opportunity for those individuals. And I really try my best to showcase a large amount of people, not just, women. For a while there, I was just focused on women. And I feel like that is important. But there's a lot of, very respectful and hardworking men within our community that are doing great things as well. So I've started to integrate that in as well. But I really just like to keep it as diverse as possible, so people are just not, bored with, oh, she has someone, that did this on there, but she had that person on there last week. I want you to be shocked every time you see Wrestling Wind Down on your podcast page. I want you to be like, oh wow, she has this person on. What do they do? Just gaining that interest and that intrigue from the audience is also what I go after when I'm trying to figure out what should I put else. What else should I put on Wrestling Wind Down?
Yeah. I like that a lot. Like you want to keep the audience on their toes.
Right.
I actually appreciate that. I can definitely appreciate that mindset. And I also love, how you were inspired to sort of tell the stories of everyone, which is something that I try to do a lot of the time too. Because I try to talk to, as you can see, I'm talking to you, you're a host. and I try not to lean so heavily on talent, on wrestling talent. As much as I
Right.
would love everybody and their mama to come on the Hardy Wrestling podcast, I mean, talking to the other people who help make wrestling work, it's just as valid. Those stories deserve to be told just as much as everybody else's. So I
Exactly.
definitely admire, your your get to itness when it comes to that. I totally admire that. I get it. So have you ever considered pursuing a wrestling media career for a major mainstream promotion like WWE or AEW or Impact or the like?
No.
No,
No.
not at all.
As much as I love wrestling and talking about it and learning about it, I can appreciate that I do not have a career in professional wrestling because I feel like I would just be worn out. I would be a perfectionist and want everything to be perfect because I'm interested in it. And, it's not like I'm not interested in the job that I do, but I love professional wrestling. And I feel like if I were to work with one of these companies, I would pour my entire heart and soul into it. I wouldn't just, half ass it. And when I was in college, I had the wild idea that I wanted to be a WWE intern one summer. Me and Haley, actually, we had talked about it on our lunch break one time. And we were looking at it, and I was kind of like, oh, maybe, but I feel like it's best that, I do this as a hobby at this point. If something comes along within, a wrestling media, not with WWE or a major promotion, I might be interested in it. But in terms of like a WWE or an Impact, I don't see myself at this point diving headfirst into that.
I understand that. You're probably the first person who's ever said, no to that type of question that I asked. Like you're the first person who's ever said no. And that is perfectly okay. In 96 episodes, you're the very first person who's ever
Wow.
said no. 96 episodes, you're the first one. No.
I definitely feel like for me, I just feel like I need that separation. Like, I enjoy doing this so much as a hobby and being able to turn it on and off when I want. But I feel like as
Mhm.
an occupation, like, you have to do it every day. Like, you can't just be like, I'm not going to go to work today. Like, I probably won't go back tomorrow either. Like, you can't do that. Like, you still work there. For me, if I, decide tomorrow that I don't want to do the podcast anymore, which I won't, um I can just say I'm not doing it anymore and just peace out. But people at work, sometimes they could do that. It just depends on the situation. But I like that separation of being able to do this as a hobby, and I want to enjoy it as much as I possibly can.
I totally get it because some people really do have that, mindset to where they feel like if it becomes a job then they won't love it anymore.
Yeah.
So I completely understand that. I remember there was a certain point in my life where I didn't understand, but now I do.
Mhm.
Because once it consumes you and it swallows you whole. And
Right.
you want to know that you have an identity outside of, where you work, because that's not your whole identity.
Right.
So I totally get and understand, why your answer would be no. Because I just know, as for me, as I get started, I just kind of want to enjoy the ride for where it might take me. Because it's taken me, pretty far, a lot farther than I thought I'd ever be.
Mhm.
Um, but if it takes me even further into a career where I am making money while talking about wrestling even more, like that would be fantastic. Like I would love
Right.
that. But at the same time, I also know that I would have to find my way in terms of figuring out who I am outside of that, or just
Mhm.
having just a strong, you know, base in who I am anyway outside of that. So I get it.
Right.
I totally get it. So, what do you think about the evolution of wrestling, since you've been watching it? Um, and how do you feel about, how it's evolved and what's good about it and what could be better about it?
I think wrestling has its ups and downs. There's some months where I'm into it, like, I'm very into it. And then there's other times where I'm like, okay, like, I really don't like this storyline, or I really don't like, how this is going. And I'll admit it, like, this Naomi and Sasha stuff has really kind of put a damper on me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it just seeing the whole situation and the assumptions that are coming out and the way it's being handled by the company, it's really put a sour taste in my mouth. I still keep up with WWE, obviously, but I will admit I do have hesitation on going to, live events. Like we have a pay per view coming up here in July, and I'm kind of like, do I really want to go to that at this point? I mean, I don't know. I've really enjoyed, the success of Roman Reigns. I feel like he's done a very good job in WWE, and he keeps me interested in watching. Bianca, of course. Even though her and Becky Lynch have had their issues, I do enjoy watching Becky Lynch because I feel like she's really grown as a character. And it's amazing that she could go and have a kid and just come right back and start her career right where she left it. And there's other moms on the roster too. I think it's incredible to see women that are raising kids, whether it's by themselves or with a partner, and they still have this, they're still living their dream at the end of the day. I think that's beautiful. But you know, right now it's like it's honestly been really difficult just with the whole Sasha and Naomi thing. But I've been watching a bit of AEW, which I haven't really been in the last couple years. I might tune in here and there, but I wasn't like actually indulged in it. And I feel like at this point I've really been keeping up with AEW on a level that I keep up with WWE, which kind of surprises me too. But I've really enjoyed, the different people that they've brought in. I really like the group with um, John Moxley and Daniel Bryan and William Regal. I've
Mhm.
really enjoyed, MJF and Wardlow's story and, Jade, her growth in the company and her baddie section, as well as some of the other women and men that are really, starting to really do a good job there. I really like Scorpio Sky. I feel like he's done a really good job. But also with AEW, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. They do stuff a lot too where I'm like, did y'all even think before you said that? Like, the comments about women and who they're sleeping with and who they've been with. Like, I don't like that. And, I feel like a good fan realizes when they don't like stuff within companies. It's not just like I'm ride or die AEW. They could do whatever on this television and I'm just gonna still watch it. No, I feel like it's important to be like, I did watch this show this week, but I didn't necessarily like that comment that he said or she said. Like he didn't have to go there with that. And that's okay. I mean, I think that we should be critical of what we're watching. We shouldn't just consume it and just be okay, with people stepping over boundaries that we might have personally. And same with WWE. They've, done stuff and said stuff, and I'm like, oh, did you really have to do that? So those are the type of things that I don't like. But there are so many things that I do. The representation that I've seen is just amazing within both companies. Obviously, they could do much better, but that's another subject for another time. But what they currently have at the table and what they're bringing to the table, I feel like we're at a good place, but we can always grow more.
Definitely. That's a really great answer and a very honest answer, in light of everything that is happening because I was watching Raw this week and I can admit with the Sasha and Naomi situation, it almost felt like a situation where you're like something bad has happened to you like and it's almost like a situation where your mom got through disciplining you and beating your butt, and then she comes in the room and asks you if you want something to eat, and you don't want to be around them at that point. That's kind of what watching WWE is like right about now with the Naomi and Sasha situation. It just feels hurtful if
Yeah,
I'm being honest, because you have these women that have given everything and done everything, for this company, and then the minute they speak out on something, and it's almost like they're villainized for it, and then it's just,
right,
and then of course we don't know, all of the behind the scenes stuff because of course we weren't there and we're not
right,
experts on the thing, but it's just seeing the way that it's being handled and seeing so much discourse going on about it. It's really hurtful when you think about the talent and everything that these women have gone through, to show that they love wrestling and to and the foundation that they are building even for future black women in wrestling. It's just sort of hurtful because it's just like since you've done it to them, it almost gives off the impression that you'll make an example out of anybody else or any other black woman who expresses her distaste about something, and just leave them out to dry. and I'm hoping the best in the situation, and I hope that they that peace can be found in the situation, and if not, then they'll go somewhere where they are loved and appreciated, and I hope that they
Right.
are being loved and appreciated, even where they are, even as they don't speak out about it, but I hope that they are being loved in their circles and appreciated in their circles even now, because it's hard. Um, and I will say this though, finding the positivity in wrestling is something that I try my best to do, even when it's the hardest things. But when it's the hardest thing to do, so I'm just still trying to find a way to do that and still trying to navigate that, even as everything is sort of topsy turvy right now. And
Yeah.
I do like AEW at this point as well. With some of the stuff that they're doing. But like you said, it wouldn't make any sense for us to just look at stuff, and just look at it with rose colored glasses. Because if you have
Right.
on those glasses, you'll miss the red flag. So,
Exactly.
hmm so what do you think about the evolution of women in wrestling media and how it's changed since you started, and what could be improved with that?
I think we're in a really good place. There are a lot of women that are hosting podcasts, YouTube channels, Twitch streams. There is so much out there, and it's very heartwarming. It's heartwarming to see women, no matter their race, their sexual orientation, they're able to showcase that they love professional wrestling. And I'm very proud because, like I said, when I first started, there were barely any, women creating wrestling content. And now, you have women like Denise Salcedo, you have Ella J, you have all these women that are, on these different platforms, whether it's WrestleZone or Fightful or etc. Or, even women's wrestling talk. Like you have these women that are very knowledgeable and they're doing all they can to make sure that women have a platform in this community. I think sometimes it can be a little bit it can be a little bit like nerve wracking when you first come in the community and you see it's all a bunch of men. But
Yeah.
now, with all these different women that are showcasing the different platforms that they're on, it makes it a little bit of like a you can breathe if you're a woman, starting your platform, or you're a fan because you're like, okay, there's people that look like me, or there's someone that sounds like me that I'm able to listen to or ask questions to. Um, I think that the only way up is or the only way to go now is up at this point, because I feel like we have so much out there for women, and we just have to keep doing what we're doing and keep growing, and be accessible to our future women that are looking to enter the wrestling media. I think the one thing, and it's just like wrestling, I feel like these older superstars, it's so good that there are resources to the younger talent. And I feel like we kind of have to do the same thing when it comes to wrestling media. Like we should be accessible for, younger people to ask questions or get feedback from. We're all in this together. You know what I mean? Like we shouldn't be gatekeeping stuff over here. So I feel like we just have to keep doing what we're doing and be resources for, whether it's someone in the community right now or it's someone just coming up. Like we have to band together.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that has helped me a lot in my evolution, is the fact that there were so many other people who had come before me, who were willing to reach out and help when I was saying, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm starting. And they're like, okay, and then they would, just lift me up and give me encouragement or give me advice on things where I felt unsure about in certain places. And I'm
Right.
still growing, and just watching, and then watching all these, I will say this though, like watching people like you and so many different women in wrestling, it made me feel like I wasn't alone at all. And I was just like, okay, well, yeah, I'm gonna be okay. I'm
Yeah.
gonna be okay. And even, men have even also reached out and helped me as well. So, I do appreciate them. But just seeing other women, especially also women that do look like me and do come from different backgrounds and different sexual orientations and everything, it makes me feel like wrestling is getting closer and closer to being what it should be, which is truly for everyone.
Right.
And I feel like media should be able to reflect that. It shouldn't just be men, on the different cards for like media questions and stuff like that. It should be women too, because we know a lot about wrestling, and sometimes we know more than the average man would.
Say it.
But yeah, we know a whole lot more and a lot more than the average man would a lot of the time. But I feel like that's not really reflected when you sometimes look at media calls, or when you look at, certain questions being submitted in for panels and stuff like that. And I feel like
Definitely.
ultimately that should be, reflected a whole lot more. And I feel like we're on our way, but it's going to take a lot more work. But, as long as there are people like us that are passionate about doing the work, then we'll be there and it'll be good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, as a black woman, how's you did mention a little bit about diversity, but I want to ask you, as a black woman, how do you feel about the evolution of diversity in wrestling? And what would need to be done to help us further succeed?
So I actually did an episode late last year where I talked about diversity and representation within WWE and AEW with Phil Lindsay of Grapsody, Court Kim, who's a journalist in New York, who's also a wrestling fan, and then Iridian Fiera of the Rest Friends podcast. And we talked about it in full. I feel like, um, for example, with WWE, like, yeah, they've grown. You think back to like SmackDown in the late 2000s, and they were being racist on there. There was people, with characters that were racist, and I go back and I watch that sometimes. I'm like, how the hell is this still up? How have they not edited that out?
Mhm.
Now I feel like they have, or I hope that they have enough knowledge to not do anything like that. But at the same time, right now we have one black woman on the main roster, and it makes me sad. It makes me, wonder, well, what if Sasha and Naomi don't come back? Like, are you going to move up? Lash Legend, are you going to bring in another black woman? Because one black woman on your main roster is unacceptable. Like
It is.
no, like it's just, it blows my mind. Now with AEW, they've had their own issues with diversity. Um, they're doing a good job now. They're bringing in, their Japanese talent. They have black women on the roster. That they have a whole bunch of, different women on their roster. But I always feel like there could be more. I really hope that they sign Willow. I think she would be a great addition. um but overall, I think we just need to keep what we're doing. But I think WWE needs to just really sit down and think, like, we have one black woman on our main roster right now. Like, how are we going to fix this? Because it is a problem. Like, it's not like, oh, okay, well, Bianca's just here. Like, maybe Sasha and Naomi will come back. We're not going to worry about it. Like, there are black women that tune in to Raw and SmackDown just to see Naomi and Sasha. And when you
Right.
don't have that, your ratings will drop. I don't keep up with ratings because I just don't. Like, it's not something that interests me. But I would be interested in knowing if their ratings have dropped since Sasha and Naomi have, been off of television. But, like I said, there are women, and there are men too who solely watch for to see people that look like them. And when you don't
Right.
have that, that's an issue. Like, you're losing your audience because they aren't tuning in because no one looks like them. Um, I that it just makes me shake my head. I was having this conversation the other day. Like, it's sad. It really is sad. Obviously, I'm a Naomi and a Sasha fan. I hope they come back because um, those tag team titles and seeing them win them at WrestleMania, like, again, another moment that I'll never forget. The first two black women to hold the tag titles, and Sasha's first win at WrestleMania, and
Right.
the fact that there are rumors that the tag titles might be extinct after this. They might not bring them back, even though there's supposed to be a tournament. Um, it's sad that it had to end with them, and it's sad that it had to end in a negative kind of manner.
Right.
Um, I just shake my head. Like, I hope that we can do better in terms of diversity within WWE. And AEW, they had their issues when the year first started, which I'm sure you're aware of, but
Oh yeah.
um, you know, that was never addressed. I feel like that was an issue with diversity as well. Like, you can't just slander your talent online, and WWE is slandering right now. So again, like I mentioned earlier, there are some weeks where you watch wrestling and you're like, you know what, I'm proud to be a fan this week. Like we're doing good, and there's other weeks where you're like, okay, I don't really like what's going on right now, and you openly admit that, and that's fine. And like I said, right now I'm kind of at the point with WWE in terms of this whole thing going on where I'm like, okay, I don't like that.
Yeah. I completely and 100% understand that because as a black woman, seeing them win those tag titles, it meant a lot to me. Even, I wasn't there, but just watching it happen, and then watching Sasha get her first win, um, at WrestleMania, it was a very powerful moment. And to see those two women win and then also Bianca win and finally get her revenge, it was just like you have these three black women at the peak of their awesomeness and they all won these titles only for the women's tag titles to now just be like an afterthought because they announced the tournament last Friday and then Monday I didn't even hear anything else about it. They just had singles matches for the women. I don't
Yeah,
recall hearing anything about the tag titles after that point. And it's sad because it was started to give more opportunity for the women. And that was what Naomi and Sasha were talking about. And if they're now, gone and absent or suspended or whatever it is that you're going with at this point, and if those tag titles are still not on television, then that just proves that they were right.
yeah.
And
You
because
know,
they were right,
it's
you
interesting that
know,
you said that you kind of mentioned that about, all three black women winning at WrestleMania, because that was what, 2 months ago. Like it's just crazy
right.
to see like the progression that has happened within the last 2 months. And obviously when I was at WrestleMania, like I was so proud. Like I just like I could feel myself getting emotional, seeing those moments. And now thinking about, okay, we're like 2 or 3 months removed and what's going on. It's almost like you couldn't write this stuff. Like you would never think this would happen. Um,
Mm-mm.
so I, it's just unfortunate. It really is.
It is unfortunate. And I'm just hoping, I'm trying to believe that, the best will come out of this situation and that hopefully WWE will understand that they're losing, two of the best talents, two of the greatest talents that they've ever had. And that, if they do lose them, that they'll be losing out on a big chunk of their fandom when that happens. But one can
Absolutely.
only hope. Yeah, one can only hope, and it would break my heart if they did decide to leave. But at the same time, I know it wouldn't be over for them. But at the same time, I'm just really hoping for the best in the situation with that. And I am proud to see, a lot of the diversity coming forward and the talent being pushed out there. But I just don't want to feel like with it being you make 5 steps forward and then five and then like 10 steps backwards either. So
Yes, exactly.
yeah, that's definitely how I don't want to feel that way at all anymore.
Right.
So when did you realize that what you were doing in wrestling was important?
That is a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is when I was in Dallas over WrestleMania weekend, and um, one of our followers came up to us and she was like, "Oh my God, wait, you're Lo from Wrestling Winedown?" And she's like, "I've been following you since the beginning." And, she was just so excited. And, you know, I have never had that happen. Like, and I remember telling Iridian, I was like, "Oh my God." I said, I couldn't believe that someone had recognized me. And, she was very nice. And the words that she shared, like, I still remember them. Like, she didn't have to stop me. She could have said, "Oh, okay, there's Love from Wrestling Wine Down," and just said hi. But, it meant a lot that she was able to take time out of her day and be like, "I've been listening from the beginning. It's so nice to meet you," and stuff like that. Um, I think that was the moment that I realized, like, like I said, I make these episodes, I do stuff, I do podcasts, I interview people, but I never sit back and think about, like, how important am I to the wrestling community? I really don't. Like, I'm doing this because I enjoy learning people's stories and I enjoy professional wrestling. Um I definitely didn't think, college me years ago that, I would have an impact on someone's life, or, people would be listening to me on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis waiting for me to upload episodes. Like, it's crazy to think about. I'm kind of just processing it as I'm answering this question, because honestly, I've never sat back and really thought about it.
Hmm. And I understand that because when you really like, it's like when you think about your impact, you don't really think that people are really paying you any attention
Right.
when you're doing it. You just don't think anybody's really looking at you or paying you any attention. But then when you go out into the world and you realize people are, it's just like, whoa,
Exactly. Exactly.
really? For real? Me? Yeah.
And it,
And
it could have to do with like
great.
a little bit, like a little sprinkle of imposter syndrome in there, where you're kind of like, yeah, you do this
Yes.
every day or every week or whatever. Like, you don't realize, like, once you get out and people are like, I listen to your podcast, or, I enjoy, buying your merch, or, this or that. And you're kind of like, you do me, like, imposter syndrome. Like, like, obviously, you know what you're bringing to the table. You're doing it every week, or you're designing merch. Like, but it's crazy to see, like you said, the amount of people that watch you or listen to you, or that you've had an impact on. So, wow.
Yeah, I guess maybe sometime we should, I guess both of us should probably just take some time to reflect on that and just think about it, and just intentionally remember that, we deserve that and that imposter syndrome can just go to hell. Um, so what would you say the future holds for you, Lo?
So, as I mentioned, we'll be doing a rebrand pretty soon, so that will be exciting. A new logo, we'll have new intro and outro music, but Wrestling Wine now will still remain, the same, with the wrestling as well as some wine education. I'm just looking, at continually growing and working with different podcasters and different people within wrestling media to, just gain those new experiences and work with new people. And I'm definitely looking forward, to attending other wrestling events and being able to meet people in person that I've only interacted with online. Um, yeah, I mean, just growing honestly is my goal at this point. I just want to keep growing and be able to be that voice for women out there who, may not know where to start, or just might, start watching wrestling and don't, really know who to listen to, or, who they should listen to on a podcast or watch on a YouTube video. Like, I just want to be that for them. I want them to not feel alone if they're, going on YouTube or going on Apple Podcasts and trying to figure out, well, is there anyone that talks about wrestling that sounds like me? Or, I want to be that consistent figure to someone. I think about, myself as like a little girl. Like, I would have loved to have heard, different women talking about wrestling. Obviously, podcasting was like not around when I was little, but, even like a YouTube series or like a TV show. Like, I wish that we had that when we were little, and that there would have been women figures like there are now for us to watch. The little girls and little boys now are just so lucky to have, different people that they're able to listen to on their phones if they have one, or, watch on their computers or their tablets. Like, it's a great time to be a young wrestling fan, I will say that. But also, us as adults, like, we are very fortunate to be able to, produce content and be able to work with different individuals, and, digest the stuff that other people are doing. I'm seeing incredible interviews and podcast episodes from all of these different people, man, women, groups of people. So that's something the future holds for me as well. Just learning more about the community and seeing who's out there that I can work with or learn from, or, anything.
Well, that's definitely a pretty hopeful and an amazing way to answer that question and to end our time together. Lo, thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. And if you would just take this time to tell everyone where they can find you and follow you and anything else you've got going on, you can do that right now.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. You can keep up with Wrestling Winedown on Twitter and Instagram at WWDCAST. We have merch. It's shop.wrestlingwinedownlv.com. We have our logo. We have our collection Pro Wrestling to Me, and then we just dropped our 1-800 War Daddy merch, which The people are loving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast again. I loved having you, and I've just always been an admirer of your work, and I just hope nothing but the best for your future. And as usual, you can follow me, your girl Stephanie Hardy, on Instagram and Twitter at Queen Steph Hardy, and follow the Hardy Wrestling Podcast on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and on Twitter at Hardy Wrestle Pod. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I've got going on and Lowe's got going on. So we're gonna go and leave you guys to your Thursday evening. But thank you for joining us on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Your favorite chill, positive, and passionate show. And until next time, bye y'all.